The epic tragedy of 1453, the fall of Constantinople, is eternally cast in bronze through the simple, chilling military artifact that breached its famed defenses, the massive Ottoman cannon known as the Basilica. For centuries, the Theodosian walls, a complex system of triple fortifications, had stood as the unconquered shield of Christendom, a physical testament to a millennium of Roman endurance. No conventional siege engine had ever humbled them. The Basilica, designed by the Hungarian master engineer Urban for Sultan Mehmed II, changed this equation. It was a marvel of destructive engineering, reportedly requiring a team of 60 oxen to transport, and capable of hurling massive stone balls weighing over half a ton. Its presence and deafening roar instantly transformed the siege from a traditional military engagement into a monumental, symbolic clash between the ancient world and the burgeoning power of modern warfare. This technological shift is the foundational premise upon which the city's fate, and its narrative immortality, is built. By the 15th century, the city of Constantinople was merely the beleaguered head of a vast, shrinking body. It was the inheritor of the Eastern Roman Empire, a polity that had survived the collapse of the West and preserved classical knowledge and Roman law for 1,000 years. Its location, bridging Europe and Asia, was a commercial and cultural pivot point. Yet, after enduring the debilitating wounds of the Fourth Crusade in 1204, and years of internal strife, the empire was a shell. By 1453, Constantinople was surrounded by the rapidly expanding Ottoman Sultanate. Its capture was not merely a territorial objective for the young, brilliant Sultan Mehmed II, it was a matter of destiny, the fulfillment of Islamic prophecy, and the gateway to undisputed power over the Black Sea trade routes and the Balkans. The date, May 29th, 1453, and the location, the ancient capital of the Caesars, therefore became the unavoidable, fateful point where two worlds, one defined by tradition and the other by a dynamic, relentless expansion, were destined to meet in a final, defining confrontation. The small Christian defense force, commanded by the last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI Palaiologos, was pitifully small, only about 7,000 to 8,000 men, including Venetian, Genoese, and Catalan mercenaries. Facing them was a colossal Ottoman army of possibly 80,000 soldiers, bolstered by the constant, systematic bombardment of the Basilica. The narrative of the siege, preserved in the accounts of participants like Niccolò Barbaro and Georges Frances, is one of agonizing, protracted attrition. The cannons relentlessly battered the formidable walls, creating breaches that were patched nightly by desperate Byzantine defenders. However, it was not the land walls, but a brilliant, unorthodox naval maneuver by Mehmed II, hauling 70 ships overland across the Pera Hills to bypass the heavy chain securing the Golden Horn, that truly sealed the city's doom. This strategic ingenuity demonstrated that the siege was a complete cultural turning point, where ancient, passive defenses were finally overwhelmed by a combination of new technology and superior tactical vision. The subsequent artistic interpretation of the fall often focuses on the deep melancholic contrast between the emperor's doomed heroism and the relentless, unstoppable march of the Ottoman artillery. The final assault came at dawn, a brutal wave of Janissaries and Bashi bazooks flooding through the critical breach in the shut, Romanus Gate sector. The human tragedy of this moment, and its immediate inscription into the historical canon, revolves entirely around the figure of Constantine XI. The chroniclers ensured his actions would be immortalized. Recognizing the ultimate failure of the defense, the emperor, having discarded his imperial regalia, led the final desperate counterattack alongside his few remaining soldiers, dying anonymously among his men. His body was never positively identified, a powerful symbolic end for the thousand-year Roman line. This act of ultimate, doomed self-sacrifice instantly furnished the West with the perfect narrative lens. The Christian martyr king defending the faith against the overwhelming tide of the infidel, a perspective that would dominate European history and art for centuries. This immediate Western narrative of profound loss and moral shock fueled both the Renaissance and the subsequent exploration. The fear of an Ottoman tide sweeping into Europe was palpable, and the memory of the fall became a rallying cry. Simultaneously, the event spurred an intellectual diaspora. The flight of Byzantine scholars from Constantinople, carrying invaluable Greek manuscript of Plato, Aristotle, and other classical texts, directly accelerated the intellectual revival and classical rediscovery in Italy. The fall of the city, therefore, was not merely a military defeat. It was a pivot point that physically and intellectually pushed the European world into its next phase, accelerating the printing press movement and fundamentally shifting the geographical centers of power and learning. Conversely, for the Ottoman, the capture of the city was viewed not as destruction but as a glorious, legitimate restoration. Sultan Mehmed II, who entered the city's heart, the Hagia Sophia, on May 29 TH, immediately proclaimed himself Caesari Rum, or Caesar of Rome. He systematically transformed the city into the new capital of his expanding empire, renaming it Istanbul and securing its destiny as the seat of the Caliphate. The Hagia Sophia, the great cathedral, was converted into a mosque, an architectural and religious transformation that physically represented the new geopolitical order. This Ottoman perspective, of continuity, conquest, and synthesis, is crucial to the event's legacy, establishing a lasting imperial counter-narrative to the Western lament of loss. The artistic and architectural interpretations commissioned by the Sultans depict Mehmed II as a world conqueror, whose achievement was not merely seizing a city, but inheriting and legitimizing the Roman imperial mantle. The concluding reflection on the fall of Constantinople must grapple with this enduring geopolitical and cultural schism. The immediate outcome was the indisputable end of the Roman imperial tradition that had stretched back to Augustus, and the establishment of the Ottoman Empire as the dominant force in the Eastern Mediterranean. The cultural significance, however, is what continues to resonate globally. The fall crystallized the divide between Christian Europe and the Islamic East, a clash of civilizations narrative that permeated Renaissance era art, literature, and even cartography, which often depicted the Ottoman lands with fearful hostility. Artistically, the scene of the massive basilica tearing down the ancient walls became a powerful metaphor for the irresistible force of historical change and the vulnerability of even the most established civilizations. In philosophy and political theory, the event served as a stark, dramatic lesson in the transition from medieval feudalism, represented by the decentralized, aid-dependent Byzantines, to modern, centralized imperial power, represented by the unified, technologically advanced Ottoman state. The flight of scholars, often summarized with a sense of romantic urgency, effectively positioned the fall as the historical punctuation mark between the Middle Ages and the early modern era for the West. The ethical legacy is perhaps the most complex. The Western narrative consistently stresses the tragedy of the loss, the last stand, the burning libraries, the conversion of churches, maintaining a moral high ground based on the defense of liberty and faith. Meanwhile, the Eastern, Ottoman, Turkish narrative frames the event as the fati, the conquest, an act of historical correction that brought justice, stability, and legitimate continuation of empire to a land that had long been fractured. This enduring, contradictory memorialization forces modern historians and ethicists to confront the problem of dual narrative, where one city's triumph is another's devastating loss. The city itself, now Istanbul, embodies this legacy, its very skyline a physical manifestation of continuous, superimposed historical layers, from the Roman hippodrome to the Hagia Sophia's enduring duality as both church and mosque. The story endures not because of its military finality, but because its opposing narrative of martyrdom and triumph remain fundamentally irreconcilable. The fate of a single city became the enduring geopolitical fault line upon which the modern world was painfully constructed.